Yeah.
All right, so the title of this is Sfarim Muhramim, banned books. We're going to discuss. It's I would say it's part one of a more elaborate discussion.
Making of a Gadol? Is it one of them?
Yeah, but it's banned books go back. We have to discuss it in the light of history, and it's a very, I would say, long and very circumlocucious tale. So let's start. Let's talk a little bit about it. Now, Ellie, you want to mute everybody?
I did.
I think you got to do it a few times because. So we'll start. Just there's a Sifri. The Sifri says a Safra b'Saifa. The book and the sword came down bound from heaven. So the kasha that a lot of people want to focus on is Torah is the Rochel Darkei Noyam Chol Nesiv V'Yisrael Shalom. Torah is something that most people see as an item of beauty. It's supposed to be, where's the sword? What's the involvement of the sword? Har Chayrev, the Medrash that says Har Chayrev, not the Gemara on Shabbos, but the Medrash says that Har Chayrev is something akin to how Har Cherev, there's death somewhere involved and intertwined in Torah. So what exactly is this? Now, obviously, the simple answer is that the Torah is a double-edged sword. It could be wonderful, but it could also not. But to serve up this, I want to just say an interesting idea. Books, Aristotle said, all men are created equal until one writes a book. When a person has the gumption and a person has temerity to put his thoughts on paper and to publicize them to the world, well, then he takes a little bit more of a chashivas. He becomes something more important. Not always. Sometimes what he writes is absolute silliness, but still, a person has to be dealt with once he's willing to put things to paper. When he's willing to commit pen to paper, okay. Now, often books were considered extremely destructive. I don't want to go through all the secular books. I want to give an example of 2 or 3 and just show that a book sometimes had the ability to create such a wave and such destruction and to create death and mayhem and casualties just because of information, either correct information or faulty information. In time, most of the people that are around today might have heard of Silent Spring, which was a book written in 1963 by Rachel Carson. This was a pseudoscientist with a non-pedigreed background. And most people will know when they look into her, they will realize that she did not come to a conclusion with real science and with real data. Her father was drunk, she couldn't afford a good education, but she was very charismatic. And then I wrote a book which was a myth about walking out in the backyard and seeing dead birds and seeing squirrels with their innards turned out and chewing on earth because they were looking for minerals that weren't obtained to them through their regular diet of foraging. And she came to the conclusion that the pesticides that were being used in America and in the world over were causing destruction in such ways that we would never, ever recover. And she made an unbelievable statement when she came to the halls of Congress and she testified after having radiation for double breast cancer. And she was completely emaciated and she could barely walk because radiation at that point and there was an inability to target the actual spot, and it was destructive, no question. After coming into Congress and testifying about the dangers of radiation and pesticides, the senator from Alaska said, every once in a while, a capital book comes around that changes the course of history. Yours, Mrs. Carson, is one such book, and it will change the course of history. And much legislation and tremendous laws against pesticides were enacted, which, to the chagrin and the dismay of a tremendous amount of people in the world, caused the spike in malaria that probably killed millions of people. DDT was not as harmful as Rachel Carson posited. Her science was not science. The data wasn't conclusive. Radiation actually is a wonderful thing for many people that survived because of radiation, myself included. Now, the basic idea was that she was hyperbolic and histrionic, and she caused a tremendous. The senator from Alaska was correct while he was saying it, the Schwach, and he wanted to somehow enforce the fact that Rachel Carson is a hero. there's a website, a website called Rachel Was Wrong, dedicated to demystifying and demythologizing Rachel Carson and showing all the different things that she did which were actually incorrect. And I'm not saying she was a bad woman. She probably had good in her heart. Probably she wasn't malicious. But this is Safra B'Saifa. The book that could have been a wonderful book actually ended up being a sword and killed and destroyed many people. Another example, a book I read, more recent book, and it was titled A Most Dangerous Book. That was the title of the book. It was written by Christopher C. Klebb. He was a German writer, and he was profiling a small book that was written in 78 AD. 2,000 years ago, a Roman historian by the name of Tacitus wrote a small monograph about the Germanic tribe. They were the North German people that were never occupied by the Romans. They single-handedly were able to vanquish the Romans. They fought the Romans with a tremendous amount of bravery. Their hero, his name was Arminius, which is Hermann in German, and extremely successful. Now, Tacitus writes a book which is not very flattering. If you read it, it's not very long. It's about 50, 60 pages. It's not a very flattering book about the German tribe. It has some good points, and it has some very bad points. The good points is he talks about their strength. He says the men are extremely strong. The women are very well built. He talks about their appearance. This was the beginning of Arianism. They are blonde like the sun. Their eyes are blue. Their skin is light. He says they could handle any amount of work and they don't falter under it. He talked about the fact that he's definite that they're indigenous. They haven't been mixed through other breeds and married in with other different segments of the region and the population. And that's why they're so tall and so healthy and so sturdy. Then he talks about and he also talks about their loyalty and ferociousness in battle. He then talks about some very horrible traits that they have. He highlights the fact that they're barbarians. They're extremely uncouth. They have no understanding of civility, of elegance, of quality. There's nothing there other than their visceral, guttural nature. He says, a very people. And then he also points out the fact that they're also engaging in some silly superstition like human sacrifices. Now, what's interesting is that this book was sort of not obsolete. It was sort of like hidden for 1,000 years after its. No one knew it. They knew it existed. It was quoted by many, but it was never seen. A manuscript was never seen or found for many, many years. Till 1425, it was found in a German monastery. The book was rediscovered by a monk who was looking for it, who knew what he was looking for. He found unbelievable manuscripts. And now a narrative started becoming discussed. The Italians, when they read it, said, what lowly people the Germans are. They only saw the negative. The Germans, they started seeing a very strong culture point. They started recognizing their etymology. In that book, they started seeing something tremendous. And to them, the book took on new meaning. And when Taoism came around and humanism, and the very important thing the book stressed was the Germans were extremely egalitarian. It is true that women were typhus a very important spot in hierarchy. They didn't have a chauvinistic approach to things. So what's interesting is that the Germans saw only the positive, the Italians saw only the negative, the narratives were created, and slowly but surely the German, what you would call the culture conference, adopting this, embracing it. Those of you that know classical music might be familiar with a very long piece, as long as the Gaulis, Wagner's Ring Cycle, which is dedicated to this concept of Aryanism and German supremacy and superiority based on Tacitus's Germania, till it became almost like a zenith, where Hitler took it and created racism, Nazism, and the whole premise for destroying all other races and the people that actually seed the world with parasitic type of seed, which was gypsies and Romanis and ultimately Hitler's plan, and if you could look it up, you could see even there's existing plans of what he wanted to do is to destroy the city of Berlin and build what he called Germania, which was a throwback to this time when the Germans were considered the most lofty of all nations. And Kleb calls this a most dangerous book. He stops short from calling it the most dangerous book, but he feels it is a most dangerous book because this book contributed to the German narrative of supremacy. This book somehow saw in it what we would call the manifestation and the genesis of German culture, and it ended up in the hands of a terrible person, destroying millions and millions of people. HaSefer V'Asayef Yardu Kruchim Min HaShamayim takes a different meaning when we understand that a book could sometimes be very devastating and very destructive. Some of you are familiar with The Jungle by Upton Sinclair, which was written in the 1900s, and it detailed the different conditions in meat factories, and it showed how dirty salami and knockwurst factories are, and it even detailed the story where a man fell into the mix, and he came out the other end, Acme, perfectly pure salami. Well, this book, which Teddy Roosevelt called a capital book and was so impressed by it, it ended up bringing down meat consumption 60%. It knocked meat suppliers out of business. It was a very dangerous, and again, up to did not come science. He came with an idea. He came with a certain pacifistic idea. It bothered him. He was probably the forerunner to concepts that PETA actually promotes today. And in a very manner, he just put something out, which is famous and it's legendary, and most people read it. But this is what everybody knows, and this is in a very good way. Uncle Tom's Cabin pretty much created civil war. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote an unbelievable story which brought people into a small family's travails and problems. And when Lincoln met her, he actually said to her, are you the little lady that caused the revolution? Now, so sometimes with such an understanding, we could understand Haramim, the different great Rabbanim put on Sfarim. We could understand different Haramim that were placed on Sfarim. For example, one of the Sfarim that I want to talk about just from the beginning, which is a famous sefer. Ultimately, we'll get to a discussion that I want to talk about, which I think is the Rambam, the Shin Yud Aleph Rambam. But those of you that learn Hilchos Shabbos are familiar in Siman Shin Zayin, Sif Yud Zayin. There's a seif in the Mechaber. The Mechaber says, "Asur lilmod b'Shabbos v'Yontif zulas v'divrei Torah." You can't learn on Shabbos and Yontif unless you're learning divrei Torah. Va'afilu b'sifrei chochmas asur. Even sifrei chochmas, some other intellectual matter is asur. V'yesh. I'm sorry. I'm reading the wrong sif. I'm sorry. Tezayin. Melitzas u'mishalim shal sichas chulin v'divrei cheshek. Kigoyin Sefer Emmanuel. V'chein sifrei milchamis. Asur likrois bohem b'Shabbos. Melitzas and mishalim. My connection is coming a little slow. So what should I do? Can you hear me, Ellie?
Yeah, if there's any way, I'm just pointing it out just in case.
I don't know what to do.
Okay.
It's coming slow.
We could hear, but it's
Maybe
just.
if I put a mic on, would it be better? You think?
I think it's the
Maybe I'll
internet.
put a mic on.
I just want to tell you, at least on this end, it's extremely clear.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The sound is perfect. The video is a little bit choppy, but that's perfect for me.
Can you hear me now?
Even in far, we will hear you beautifully.
I'm a Chaim.
I started. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Okay, let's just continue.
All right. Okay, I will. Okay, I put on a mic. Maybe that'll make a difference. Just tell me if it doesn't. We'll work through this. So again, the Mechaber brings down that Melitzas u'mishalim shall sichas chulin v'divrei cheshek again Sefer Emmanuel v'chein sifrei milchamis also likvem b'Shabbos. Okay, so Emmanuel and sifrei milchamis. It doesn't really tell us what sifrei milchamis is, but I once read. First of all, there's a book. It's called Sefer B'Sayef by Moshe Carmeli Weinberger, who details Mamisha an exhaustive list of banned books. He has a lot of information. Every once in a while, if I'm allowed to say, he has a toast here and there, but it's still a very valid and valuable book. Those of you that can get it, it's an amazing book. Now, he, I think, brings down, there is a sefer, with the Mechaber is talking over here about Malitzas and Mishalim Shal Sichas Chulim, the Divrei Cheshek, you're going Sefer Emmanuel, V'chein Sifrei Milchamis. The Mechaber brings down four isurim, 4 violations that reading these books are koruch with. 4 violations that these books are problematic with. One is like this. He says it's is Moshe of Leisim, and then it's Al Tifnu Eloi Elilim. Now you have to understand that the book of Emmanuel models itself around Boccaccio's Decameron. Those that are familiar with Boccaccio and his writing of the Decameron, it's a disgusting book. For the most part, it's authored during a plague. It's authored during a plague, one of the famous bubonic plagues, and I think it was 7 women, 3 men went off to some sort of a villa to spend quarantine over there in the comfort of each other's intellectuality. And to pass the time, they're going to tell each other stories. And over the course of time, they tell each other 100 stories, and that's why it's called Decameron. It's 100 stories of 100 nights. Some of the stories are disgustingly lurid and erotic. Some of the stories are just simple anti-Catholicism stories. Some of them are nice Musa Haskell stories. But to some extent, Emmanuel of Romi, Hatzifroni, wrote a book, mostly poetry. It's written in verse, but there's a lot of very interesting parallels that he does with Dante's Divine Comedy and Boccaccio's Decameron, where he details a lot of stories, a lot of erotica, a lot of things that are really hard for us as from people to take in and see as something that's valid. The first person that actually called attention to the fact that Emmanuel is a horrible book was somebody by the name of Moshe Rieti. He's probably the great-great-grandfather of the speaker Yonatan Rieti. And Moshe Rieti was an Italian chacham, a philosopher that wrote a sefer Mikdash Ma'at that wasn't published until the 1850s in Vienna. And in it, he writes, again, it wasn't known by the Mechaber Mistameh because the Mechaber didn't see the sefer, but he was the earliest person that called attention to the fact that Emmanuel Ephraimi is a problematic individual, and his book doesn't give Yirah Shamayim. In fact, it's only Moishech Taivas and causes things for people that are not acceptable. He was, I would say, much more of a Victorian mind, and he didn't have the ability to be civil this in Yadus. The Mechaber writes that Emmanuel and the Sifrei Milchamis and others, he says there's a number of Isurim. One is Moshe of Leitzim, the other is Al Tifnu Eloi Elilim. Now, could be in the Sifrei Milchamis, some of the kings were very connected to certain idols or certain types of deities, and this would be a problem of Al Tifnu Eloi Elilim. And he says another is Ubedivrei Cheshek. There's another one, Mishum Megari Yetzirah. To read erotica is definitely awesome because it creates Yetzirah. He says Umisha Chibron, Umisha Etikon, Mchtiyim Mesarabim. Now, the Ramah has an interesting critique over here. He says, listen, he says, Yesh L'Daktek, Hada Osser Likrois Besichas Chulim Besipurei Milchamis, Hainu Dafkim Ksuvim Beloshen Laz, Avo Beloshen HaKodesh Shari. He says, and the Ramah is very specific. The Ramah is accepting the ban against Emmanuel of Rome. But the Mechaber bunched in 2 things. He said Emmanuel is unacceptable. War books are unacceptable. I think I read once that he's speaking about a specific war book. He's not speaking about all war books, but it doesn't sound like that. Now, the Mechaber said both are Osir, Tales of Wars, and Emmanuel is Osir. And he details and delineates 3 or 4 Isurim. The Ramah comes and says war books and Sichas Chulin. He says, I want you to know that's not also unless it's written in a vernacular. But if it's written in Lashon Kodesh, then it's okay because Lashon Kodesh is a holy language. The Gra argues on this. The Mishnah Berurah sides with the Gra, and therefore the Gra and the Mishnah Berurah, it's also for us. But Moshe Carmeli, when he details the position against Emmanuel, he says Emmanuel is something that was banned by the Mechaber but supported by the Ramah. He's making an error. The Ramah never supported Emmanuel. The Ramah understood that Emmanuel is unacceptable. I think in 1490 in Brescia, and it was not reprinted for about 250 years after that because of the ban that the Mechaber placed on it, and primarily the ban was because it was erotica. It has no Yiddish flavor. It's something that's Mo'erer Yetzar in a person, and it wasn't acceptable. The other book that's interesting to talk about is the Sefer Mo'erei Naim over here. Now, the Mo'erei Naim is something different, and ironically, the Chidah, I can't read, but you could talk up. I can't read; it's too small for me. But if somebody has a question, you're definitely welcome to interrupt and ask, and I'll do the best I can.
The question was, how different is Sefer Emmanuel from the writings of better-known Sephardi Rishonim, whom I have heard also wrote erotic poetry?
Okay, fine, like Yisrael Najara, they're not. And the truth is, there were many people that apparently much more known. Emmanuel was very well read, and you also have a mazel to be banned. It seems like if you were well known and you were on the radar, then you got banned. There was a story, there was a bunch of books by somebody named, I forgot his name, but he wrote Soina Anoshim, Soina Mamen, let me see. His name was, one second here, his name was Yehuda ben Yitzchak ibn Shabtai. It was printed in Kushta in the year Shin Gimel. It's a very dumb book. It makes absolutely no sense. It's an ode to staying single, and he's promoting misogyny, promoting not. It's like a very modern book. That was not banned. I don't think he was known. Somebody did write a counter book called Oyev Anoshim. A lot of books were not banned because I think they weren't tied for so much malkum. It seems to me that Emmanuel wrote with very good scale and very good meter. It seems to me that the Makam was becoming very popular then, that style of writing, which was an amalgam of prose and poetry. And he had the mazel to be known and to be recognized, and that's why he was banned. Why Yisrael Najara wasn't banned, and those of you that are familiar with Kapach's grandfather and his famous polemic against a lot of different things, faulting some of the mystical writing with erotic tenor. I don't know what the gvulim are, and I don't know where it became acceptable and where not. But this certainly didn't have kedusha in it, and this certainly didn't have anything that was redeeming, and it seemed very logical to ban it. The other one,
from what I've read in Sefer Emmanuel, it seems to be tame in the face of certain passages in Yecheskel, in Hosea, and even Shir Hashirim.
Right. Okay.
I didn't find it to be.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That was what somebody in a different square asked that question before. Adafik asked that. I don't have the answer. I think that probably he didn't have the pedigree of Yecheskel. Mustami didn't have the chshivas that Yecheskel had, nor did he have the chshivas of Shlomo HaMelech. He was somebody that was writing something that you couldn't invade Kedusha and Tahara. You couldn't talk about whatever Klois HaNefesh to the Shechina, and you couldn't see in it what everybody sees, even in Yisrael Najara. And therefore, he was Zeichen.
And it wasn't Ma'ira to be Mekayim Pirya Verivya. It's like Takas Atapoach or Aticha. If you want to find merit, you could find already.
Yeah. I hear you. What do you mean? Emmanuel is erotic. That I have seen.
Yeah, and it's erotic, but
it's also. I think it's important. What I said before is it does have some sort of mirroring to Boccaccio's Decameron, and if you read it side by side, I'm not advocating that you do that. It's usher, like the Mechaber says, with 5 isurim. But if you would read Emmanuel side by side, you'll want to know mi ganav mimi. You'll want to know who took from who. And to that, I have news for you. I hear that that's ban-worthy. I'm saying I'm very open-minded, but I hear that that's ban-worthy. It's not Yecheskel. He's not mirroring it for Psukim and Yecheskel. He's not mirroring it with Psukim and Shir Ashir. That's the Kafach's problem with all the poetry of Najara and the poetry of the Arizal. But again, to that, there was very strong rebuttals against Kafach.
Yeah.
The Sefer Emunas Yisrael against Kafach's Milchemes Hashem. But the point over here is I guess I would recommend, if you have such a question, read it side by side with Boccaccio's The Cameron. V'timtza nachas, you'll see that there's no kasha. Kasha's miyusha.
Sometimes Tumah v'Tahara, a mamish geklippus hashum. You have to have Ruach HaKodesh to be able to differentiate. That's the problem.
You know what? Neman alai Rabbi Yosef Karo and Rabbi Moshe Rieti. I don't know who Rabbi Moshe Rieti was, but it seems like he was Nechshav. Certainly, the Beis Yosef is banning Emmanuel, and I think that his account of Kedusha and Torah is probably acceptable. If his halachas are acceptable, I'm sure his leader is also acceptable. So let's
In terms of Sefer,
probably the answer that we worked out over here together. Sefer Milchamis.
Homer is a Sefer Milchamis.
It's Homer. I once heard that it's Yehuda ben Shabtai wrote. Am I heard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yehuda ben Shabtai wrote a book. There was Milchamas Spania. He wrote it in the 1200s, and that was banned. And the same person who wrote Avas Hanoshim wrote this book, and that was banned. And a lot of people said that it was banned because he invoked a lot of the different deities and the idols and items of worship that some of the Spanish kings believed in. And could be that's the Milchamis. I don't know that it's Homer. Look, let's move on and drop. But,
the Iliad, I read the Iliad until I got bored about 3 pages in, and it's full of shemus of deities and avodah zarah and all of that stuff. It's a classic Sefer Milchamis of the early Greeks, which is full of war, killing, and
I'll just digress for a second. I'll digress for a second. I'll talk about Homer for a second, just for a second. So I want to talk about Rabbi Azariah ben Adumim and the Moreh Naim, but let's digress for a second. The emesis is that there's a Mishnah and Rabbi Akiva. We're talking about the people that have no chelik leilam haba. Rabbi Akiva says afakar b'sifrei chitzayim. So the Gemara says over there, my sifrei chitzayim. There's two malachim. What's sifrei chitzayim? And it seems like Sifrei Chitzayim is Ben Sira and Ben La'ana. Now, okay, the Gemara goes through a passage of what Ben Sira is, and it's not the Ben Sira that we know. The Gemara brings down a tremendous amount of litzanis that could be found in Ben Sira that Chazal seem to have had. Ben Sira is a verse book it's a tremendous amount of wisdom, and it's a lot of very good advice, almost like Polonius Hilarities in Shakespeare. It's not problematic at all. And it doesn't sense why Rabbi Akiva would say Ben Sira is a good book. That's a very important kasha. It bothered many people. The Ritva was bothered by it. The Beersheva was bothered by it. Others were bothered by it. Another very important kasha is that the fact is that the Gemara brings down from Sira in a number of sources. The Gemara brings down from Ben Sira and Baba Kama. The Gemara says, Minoah Milsa Da'amri Inshi, Dikla Bisha, was a sharky there, whatever Azla. A bad he goes with bad twigs. And the Gemara brings down Davazeh Shanoi, whatever. It's Shanoi the crow. It's Ksuvim. Ksuvim Kaleif Lemineu Yishkain. The Mefarshim say, what's Kaleif Lemineu Yishkain? There's no pasuk like that. That's Ben Sira. So in the Gemara and Baba Kama, we're calling that Ksuvim. Kaleif Lemineu Yishkain is a raya that birds of a feather flock together. Minoah Milsa Damri Inshi that I wrote it down. One second. It's Metayel v'Ozel Diklisha Gavikina the Sharka. that a bad tree goes with bad twigs. That's the Gemara is using it. Rabbi Akiva just said the Klei Mappa, and the Gemara is using it. There's a Gemara in Eruvin. People rely on this Gemara. It's a Gemara in Eruvin Daf Samach Hey, that if a person's very tired, he shouldn't daven. Why? Because it says Batzar al Yoire. Rashi says Chipasti. I didn't find pasuk Chlal. Tosfos says it's not a pasuk in Ksuvim. It's a pasuk in Ben Sira. Tosfos is very comfortable saying Shenemar Batzar al Yoire, which is an instruction and an indication to persons who are tired and are very exhausted that they shouldn't daven because the daven tzach mishtazeh. So that's an instruction from a pasuk that Tosfos says is written in Ben Sira. What? Somebody said. Okay. And then the third one that I know of, there's probably more. There's a third one in Baba Basra on Daf Tzadik Chesam and Beis, which says over there that it says over there that a person shouldn't live by chamua. A person shouldn't live by a shver's house. I hope there's nobody here with that. A person shouldn't live by a shver's house. Why? Because Ben Sira says, "Hakol shokalti." I weighed everything bekaf moznayim. V'lo matzasi kal misubin. I didn't find any lighter in terms of volume than Subin, than bran. And he said, Kal Misubin was even lighter than bran. Chosan Hadar b'beis chamav. A guy who lives in his father-in-law's house, he's even lighter than bran. It's like it's a double entendre. V'kal mi chosan Hadar b'beis chamav v'reach machmis tzeireach. A guest who brings another. V'kal mi machmis tzeireach meshek bar darim yishma. Okay, so this is the Gemara. This is all in Basira. So for the Gemara, it's acceptable. Multiple places. Not only that, for the Gemara, it's acceptable to use Ben Sira and to even call it Ksuvim. And for us, it's not acceptable. So Aleph, what's the problem? Beis, you see the Gemara uses it, and Gil, there's a Yerushalmi that says that Sparm Chitzonim is also going Ben Sira, Ben Lana, Humirus, and the other Sparm. That's mutter to read. Why? Because you could read them. The Homer, Humir. I always believed it's Homer until somebody here tells me I'm wrong. But I think that it meant Homer, and that's the Higoya Nitnu V'Leili Yigia. Kairabam Kekarabi Yigeris. Why? Because the Higoya Nitnu V'Leili Yigia. So Hagatzmacha. You could read Homer. You could read all these. The Iliad and the Odyssey. The Odyssey is worse than the Iliad. It's a whole bunch of dysfunctional demigods that are doing tremendous amount of things to make wie man sagt Speis mit Anshe Chelet. That's readable, but Ben Sira isn't. Doesn't make sense, right? So the emphasis is that there's terutzim to this. The Ritva in Eruvin, he says that everything that Rabbi Akiva asid, he didn't aser with totality. Rabbi Akiva asked to study it and to be minded yourself and to use that as a guide and to use that as something that's what you would call a source. But stop to look at it, it's all mutter. And that's why the Gemara is able to glean teachings from Ben Sira and utilize them because it's all mutter to be using it as a minor source. Okay, it's interesting. The Beersheva has a whole different approach. He's Meshana the Yerushalmi. He'll only answer up the Yerushalmi. The Beersheva and Sanhedrin will not at all help us with the Beersheva will not at all help us with the other problems. Interesting, there's two answers that I saw. One is from Reb Ruven Margolius in his book called Yesod HaMishnah V'Arichasa, and he has an interesting take. He says that when Chazal asked during the time of Rabbi Akiva, Kriya B'Sfarim Achitzainim, there was probably a tishtush of chashivas in the world. The canon, the Chav Dalet Sfarim weren't written kechativa achas. There were the 5 books of Moshe, which is Torah Misina, and then everything was written slowly over time, in different times and different increments of time. So Memela, when Chazal Asid Sfarim Achitzainim, that was to put a gushpanka of chashivas on the Sfarim that needed to be nechshav and not to be metashtish the yardstick b'chlal. Now that we all understand that Tuvia, Chanoich, Maccabees, all the other Sfarim, the Chalai Mordechai, whatever the Sfarim Achitzainim are, who nobody even knows their names today, let alone studies them. It's a college course, if anything. So there's no danger. Batla asiba, batla takana. That's how Reb Ruven Margolius sees it. To me, I like a different answer. Unfortunately, the first time I saw it was in a sefer called Binu Shnois Dar Vadar. And those of you that know, Binu Shnois Dar Vadar is not the quotable sefer, but Binu Shnois Dar Vadar is not Weiss. It's somebody named Nosson David Rabinowitz. Even I'm not looking to say anything not nice about anybody. And the sefer, I think, is from Rav Hutner and some very great people. And it is a good sefer. It is a good sefer. The question is it all his stuff? Okay, but good. He has something interesting there that he claims that I remembered. I didn't find it. That he says I'll tell you, the one that does say it is Avram Kahana in his Mavoi of Svarim Chitzonim does say this clearly as his own piece. But there I saw it from the Tosfos Rid. Piece, and it answers everything, and that's because he understands that the Christians, the new Christians, wanted very much to create a seamless continuity from Bereshis all the way down to the last of their Gospels. And they found that ability. There was a tremendous par. There was an opening of 400 years, a gap that had to be filled. And they were able to utilize the Apocrypha, all these Svarim Chitzonim, to fill that gap. And if you were reading the Svarim Chitzonim and you were giving them some credibility, ostensibly what you were doing was you were feeding right into their religion. You were feeding right into their narrative. And that was not acceptable. And Memela, B'Yomenu, that there's a Brisa Chadash and a Brisa Yeshana, and there's a clear understanding and a delineation of time and place and space. So there is no danger and there is no problem. Memela, it's not a difficulty to read the Svarim Chitzonim, and that's why there are people that know Svarim Chitzonim, and even in the time of the Gemara, there was already a very strong clarity as to when that religion starts, and that religion does not at all see itself as a continuity. In fact, it sees itself as a new arrival of someone that's coming to change or to add or whatever it was, and therefore, with that fear gone, Svarim Chitzonim is mutter. And that's why Homer wasn't such a problem. Back to your question when you were talking about Homer wasn't such a problem. And even a lot of the different things that are banned over time, when it's Batla Tam, Batla Asiba. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, for example, the Azarim and Adumim, Mistama, it's not Batla Tam, Batla Siba, because the Tam and the Siba remain till today. But for example, Spinoza's works, where there was a chair in Hebrew University that teaches Spinoza. So Rav Yitzchak Isaac Herzog was asked if it's mutter to introduce Spinoza, and he pretty much, I forgot his tshuva, but it's in his psakim utshuvis. I think it's Kuf Yud Aleph. I have a copy of it. I got it from Eli's father, and there he says not all charamim encompass dairy. Some do, some don't. The logic is that Spinoza as an individual was dangerous. His work was not as dangerous. And mainly you could study his work if it's not dangerous. And the chair in Hebrew University is acceptable. And they donate his work and all the books in Hebrew University. But what's interesting is that the Ma'or Einayim, that probably is a cherem that stays till today. And for book collectors, it becomes an interesting thing. Allowed to own it. The collectors that like to have it. How are you allowed to have it? And I'll explain. In the source that I know really is the Machzik Bracha. But in this din that we were just learning about Sefer Emmanuel, so the Chidah in the back, in the Isafis of the Machzik Bracha, brings down the discussion that Rebbe Elisha Galiko, together with Ramosha Alshach, had with the Beis Yosef 2 days before his death, with an effort to ban this Sefer as something awful. And he brings down the Nusach Aksav that they had placed in front of the Beis Yosef. They had to ban it, burn it, get rid of it. It should be B'Bal Yerod, B'Bal Yimatz. I'll read it to you in a second. And the Beis Yosef tragically died a day before he was able to put pen to paper, therefore was never signed. But interestingly, I just wanted to share a Nakuda, and that's why it could be some people have it, and that was my head there with this. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but I'll just share this Nakuda. the Ma'orei Naim is a book written in 3 halakim. It's written, Koila Lekim is the first chalik. Koila Lekim is about an earthquake in Ferrera with a tremendous magnitude and tremendous displacement that he was saved from, and he details it with tremendous clarity and detail. That's Koila Lekim, nothing problematic in that. The next one is Hadra Zekanim, and that's a translation of the apocryphal work called the Igeres Aristias. And then after that, the last volume is called Imre Bina, and that's interesting. It has 2 halakim. It's a treatise on Agadita. He treats many, many different Agaditas in a very super rational way, something that appeals to rational individuals. For example, he can't at all comprehend the fact that Titus would have had a mosquito in his head the size of a fist. He sees it more as a headache, the size of a migraine. He sees it more. Everything is pretty rational. Him, the Maharal and the Beragila in Siman Vav is on him with Soilela, tremendous anger. He talks about him with tremendous buzz, mostly for the way he interprets Agadita. The Maharal resents the way he interprets Agadita. The Maharal feels it's a Kalas Das, it's a Kalas Roish. For you to see that Agadita is the way it should be taifas mokum by you is unacceptable. As Kayadua, the Maharal goes on to explain Agadita in his own inimitable fashion with a language that was created completely and strictly by himself. And it makes sense that the Maharal is going to be highly offended by the Ma'orei Naim, by Rav Azaria Min Adumim. Now, what's interesting is that the taina that really was leveled against him by a lot of halachists, and there were a lot of people that were in the discussion. Rav Menachem of Porto, a kohen who wrote the Mincha Bula, the Rami Hano, Reb Yehuda Provenzali, Rabbi Yehuda Moscato, the Nefutzas Yehuda, the one that wrote the beer on the Kuzari. They were all very upset by something he did in the Imre Bina, which was he collected a lot of historical data, and he worked with a tremendous amount of secular data, and he, in his timeline, showed that we're not following the accurate timeline. Our calendar is off. And the Mele Gul is going to be either later or earlier. I don't know, his conclusion was conclusion. The first one was Paro Assange, the Marshik. He said, if so, you're passing all the tin. You're passing all Shtaris, because the way we date it is an inaccurate date. And this man that's incorrect is puzzle and poison. It's a terrible thing. And a lot of Rabbanim got involved in this discussion, in this pomus, and he took out parts of this. Not only that, he answered. He gave a very good answer. It was said and he said, listen, the time and the Zman that we use today is acceptable. Fear Avon of the Zman and the time today. Shtaris Aram Paisel, he had rayas for this. So much so, he was looking and he was eager to work his details out and to have the Sefer accepted, that he added the polemic of Provenzali in the back of his Sefer. In Shin Lamida, he put out new pamphlets that were attached to the, and that's what you find sometimes a collect has a Ma'orei Naim with 180 pages and sometimes 192 pages, because extra 12 pages at the end were the additions, the complaints against him, and his rebuttal and Provenzali's acceptance of part of them. He was very eager to please, and he was very eager to be accepted. Alas, it didn't work like that, because the truth is that the taina that the Maharal had was the actual taina that stuck, and that was what the Maram Alshich had a problem with, and that was what Rebbe Elisha Galiko had a problem with, and that's why I'll read to you in the Kuntris Achron on page Kuflamet Gimel in the Sefer Machzik Bracha. He brings down, like he says, Matzasi begins a Rav Gadol. Again, the Chida was one of the biggest bibliographers, as evidenced by his Shema Gedolim. There's information in the Magal Toiv, and there's always a lot of information that he drips along the route in all his other Sfarim. He was a very big bibliographer. So Nemanim Aleinu Dvarov, when he says he saw it, he saw it. But, hello? Did I get lost over here? Am I still online?
Yep.
Ali?
Yes.
Okay. So he writes like this. He says, Motzasi begins a Rav Gadol. Piska achas shekosav harav agadol marav Elisha Galiko. He says, "Begam nilvei lo vagoin maram alshich ve'taktia ois ba'ois." He says, here it is. Leman leitia emes nederes. The truth has to be told. Oidia ne'emana. I'm going to reveal. Ichuva lefnai sefer shechiber. I'm sorry. I can't tell if I'm on or off. So.
It's good now. It's good.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Echuva lefanai sefer shechiber Rav Azaria min ha'adumim hanikra mo'irei nayim ubepaschi amadati marid. Now you'll see who the writer is in a second. Ubepaschi amadati marid. I was shaking. Kibali safek hamekayim oive mishum bal yirah bal yotzei. If you have the book, it's an isser. He says ubechein huva lifnei moifes hador v'hadoroi. It was brought in front of the great Gadol, Rav Gadol, Rav Yosef Karo. V'achayomim sholach acharai. Now again, the Beis Yosef wanted something different written. It doesn't say what was written. V'toiref ha'mechuvan haya shehayaroi listrek v'lahaver ba'eshes ha'sefer ha'niskar b'chol makom v'shetoma ala rabbanim hashem koyman eich nichbad fisay v'leichoshu l'kvoid ha'torah v'ikoreo. And all this was an echo or a re-echo of the Maharal's problems. Now Galiko is writing. He says, I took my time. I didn't bring that rewriting of this ban. In the interim, the great Beis Yosef got sick with the illness that eventually took his life. Uv'chol chachmei Yisrael machzike emes adaber shalom no matzar Elisha Galiko. He has an edition that's signed Kol Advarim Ha'ele Shamati Gam Ani, and that's no matzar Moshe Reb Chaim Alshich. So you see the Alshich and Reb Elisha Galiko was a famous Mechaber Sfarim on the Sifrei Emes. They clearly understand that this sefer was banned, and it was a perpetuity ban. This was not just a ban that was Lizman v'Lishah like Spinoza, or a ban that was for the Sifrei Chitzayim the way the Tosfos Rid understands. This was a ban be'emes and a ban forever. And Kayadua in the Mishpatei Cherem of the Ramban, it is possible for a generation to establish a ban that will lock and make the next people that come the Omead have to comply. Okay, I wanted to start talking about the ban against the Rambam Shin Yud Aleph, but I think it's already it's already a lot of time passed. So do this the next time I'm invited to speak. But just this is the Rambam I want to talk about. This Rambam was banned by the Ramah in Tshuva Yud. The Ramah banned this Rambam, not a ban the way the Rav Azaria min ha'adumim was banned, but it was banned, and we'll discuss why, and we'll discuss why it's mutter. The only thing I have is a little chiddush that I think was nisgala to me, that there's a siba that the Ramah banned that's not even brought down in the tshuva. So Amir Hashem, next time we talk, I would love to discuss this. Thank you so much for joining me, and Eli, so much for putting this together. I appreciate it.
I think we'll try to schedule for after Shavuos. Does that work for everybody? For the Rav?
For me, yeah.
We could do even before.
Rabbi, thank you.
Okay, so
Thank you very much, Rebbe, and thank you, Eli.
Thank you.
Elio.
Welcome. Thank you. Yasher Koyach, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Charlie Shaw, Rebbe.
Yeah.
Does this have any relevance, this ban on wars concerning, books concerning wars, the Josephus work on the wars of the Jews? Is it at all?
Yeah. No, so there, it's interesting that it's a reference to Josephus? No, it's not.
Rashi quote.
Rashi, see, the question is,
why doesn't it apply?
Rashi quotes it in Brooks, but why?
Why doesn't it apply if you have a ban like that?
What do you ask?
On what basis is that therefore excluded from the ban on wars, books on war?
maybe books on Jewish history is different than books on war. It's Hashgacha Pratis. I don't know. I hear the question.
How about Sefer
I hear the
Milchamos
question.
Hashem?
The Ramban.
Milchamas Hashem from the Ralbag, yeah, that was banned. So that if you could get Carmeli Sefer, he goes through. It's a tour de force of almost everything that was banned or thought to be banned. It's a pretty good book. I'll happily lend it to you.
Carmeli from YU?
Milchamas Hashem. Every Milchamas Hashem came out was banned. Whether it was Kapach's Milchamas Hashem, whether it's the Milchamas Hashem written by the Ralbag. The Moreh Einayim were banned. There's 2 or 3 Moreh Einayims that were banned, and there's a few Milchamas Hashem that were banned.
The Ramban's Milchamas Hashem on the Rif is
No, that wasn't banned. That's Milchamos Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you,
Rabbi, thank you.
Thank
you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make one note. Possible? Can I just add an anecdote?
Sure.
Yeah, Josephus writes about Titus that he was a good person. He didn't really want war, but the Bayonim he makes him out to be a tzaddik niflo.
Right.
So the question is, so Reb Tzaddik HaKohen writes the Gazach. Reb Tzaddik says that those who saw him thought so, but the Chazal were Yered L'Soif Daitoi, and they said he was a Rosh Merusha. In other words, you need Ruach HaKodesh, you need some Reb Tzaddik to understand what you see. That's what I'm trying to point out.
Josephus worked
Very
for
good.
them.
Very good.
Josephus worked for them. He's not
Correct, I understand, but Reb Tzaddik says, you're right, Reb Tzaddik said that ostensibly, if you looked at it, it's the way he looked. So the Chazal were Yered L'Soif Daitoi, and they said as Rosh Merusha, because they were able to Yered L'Soif Daitoi of a person. Yeah.
Is this the same Carmeli from YU?
Yeah.
Moshe.
Weinberger. His name was Weinberger.
But it's Moshe Carmeli, right?
Yeah.
It's a vice versa.
I don't know. The pictures of him is
I remember him.
It's on Gonsalach.
Oh, well. Maybe he grew it.
He's a big student of all how do you call it? Of all not what's the word I'm looking for? Zikukim. Sifra Zikuk. What's the word I'm looking for? It's not coming to me. All the censorship. He's a big student of censorship. So he was. He revisited. There's a book by William Popper that was published in 1899, and he republished that. He did a Sefer Asayef. He did censorship in art. He did a lot of very interesting work.
What was the name of this?
On his what?
The one that you were citing tonight.
Sefer V'Hasayef. A Sefer V'Hasayef.
That was Carmeli.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the Moreh Einayim, would you say his things that made him controversial were theological or like against the Ikrim, or stam other things that had to do with the Messiah?
Oh, it's you have to see the Maharal in Vav takes him to task for just seeing himself on par with Chazal, seeing himself as a Bar Plukta, seeing himself as somebody that could. That means it's almost like Mevaz Talmud Chacham, that type of. Again, there were the halachists. There's a guy named Ruvain Banfil. He wrote a very, I would say, comprehensive book on Azarim Nadumim, and he details all the different criticisms against him. There's the halachist criticism with the shtaris, and then there's the Hoige Machshavas. I'm saying the great men in Machshavas Yisrael that very much were offended by the rationalization of everything in Chazal.
To be fair, the Rambam did the same thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And the Rambam was banned probably much more harsh than
Rabbi, they burned the Sfarim.
Rabbi Yoina burnings of the Rambam Sfarim.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But the Ber Nevuchim, still today, there are Rosh Yeshivas that hold that you can't read it. So I've heard positions from great men in Yeshiva that the Ber Nevuchim is not the chelik of the Rambam that we were Mekabel. Go figure.
How can you split it in two? Balgini the Buri, but like Balgini Gavra.
Okay, okay,
And I heard,
I don't know what's
Yankov Kamenetsky's grandson, that B'Shem's grandfather, that Hilchos Deis in the Rambam is also not the Rambam that we accept.
right, right. I think that's in his Sefer Yaakov.
Yeah.
I heard it from his grandson.
Okay,
40 years ago.
I don't know. I don't understand that. By Acher, I understood Rameya was Teicher Ochal Klipas Zorak, but how do you say that about the Rambam?
I saw in Vayoel Moshe, I saw the Satmar Rebbe brings, in Daf Kufnan Hey, he brings about the shots. Why half the world went after him? Says the shots by 15, Nukol HaTorah Kula, including Kabbalah, and he made Oisus and Moisim, and he was Machzor B'tshuva with tens of thousands of Eden. And he's trying to point out that McKenzie and Azay Goys, but he's trying to point to the Gabi Zionism.
Hyperbole.
I hear you. Okay, Rabbi Sam, I'm going to say good night. Thank you so much.
Is it shaykh to get a link? You recorded it. Can we get the link?
So Rabbi Raful is going to...
Yes, if you're on the WhatsApp chat, so I'm going to share it with the WhatsApp chat.
Okay. If Yehoyash has it, if you give it to Yehoyash, I'll get it from him.
Rabbi Fuchak, one question?
I think he left.
Left? Okay.
Goyach, it was gewaldig. We need more of them.
Wonderful night. Have a wonderful night.
Mishum Taibel, I think you're on the group as well. Mishum Taibel.
Yeah, okay. Shkoyach, Adaink. Thank you.
Thank you, Elio.
Thank you.
Welcome.